Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I was picking out some supplies for the week when I noticed a kid trying frantically to climb a shelf to get a case of energy drink. So I reach up and grab it for her. I hand it to her and she smiles, says thanks, and runs off. As she runs off, she trips since cans flying and getting sprayed from the popping cans. The poor thing started freaking out a bit while I pick up the cans and try to calm her down. Little did I know she wasn't freaking out because she felt bad for making a mess. "What the hell are you doing?" the thieving Karen in training yells from down the aisle. Next thing I know, I see this 17-year-old girl storming down the aisle. "Why the hell are you crying? I told you to get me a case of energy drink and meet me at the car." I say, "It's okay. She just tripped and is a bit freaked out she made a mess." "Who the hell are you?" "I was just helping her get it down before she..." "What did you knock her down for? You can't do that." "I didn't do anything. I was just helping her." "You just screwed up. Where is your manager? Give me your manager now." "What the hell are you talking about? I don't work..." "Shut up! You just hurt my sister and I'm going to sue the hell out of your store." As she's screaming at me, the manager of the store walks up. He sees a mess of cans and energy drink on the floor, a little girl crying, and a pissed off teen screaming at a 30-year-old guy. "What's going on here?" "Your idiot employee just stopped my little sister from grabbing that case of energy drink and hurt her. I'm going to sue the hell out of you now." The store manager looks over to me and asks what happened. I told him I had no clue. I just handed the little girl the case and she took off and tripped. He then walks over to the little girl. He asks, "Are you okay? What happened?" And the little girl wipes back tears. "I didn't want to. She made me." "She made you do what?" the store manager asked. "She made me take it. I was supposed to grab it and take it to the car." And the Karen chimed in. "It doesn't matter, your stupid employee hurt her trying to stop her. I'm going to sue you for assaulting my sister." He then reached down and held the little girl's hand. "It's okay, let's get you cleaned up." He motioned for the assistant manager that came by to see what was going on. He told her to take the little girl to the back room to get her cleaned up. "You think this is going to save you? We're still going to sue no matter what you do." She then followed the assistant manager and the little girl into the back. The store manager then asks me to follow him to the front of the store where he flags down the police cruiser sitting in the parking lot. Well, I don't live in a nice area. They called another car in, the store manager and I watched the thieving Karen being taken away kicking and screaming. "What are you doing? Employees can't touch you. He hurt my sister. Arrest them. Little girl, they hurt you. Tell them." But the little girl didn't say a word and just watched while she clung to the assistant manager. The store manager informed the cops I didn't work for him and that I didn't try to stop the little girl. He showed them the security tape so I was in the clear. The officers then took a statement from me and let me go. Turns out their mother was a douchebag that didn't give a rat's about them and was never home. The thieving Karen was abusing her sister and forcing her to steal for her. Child Protective Services was called in, took the little girl out of that horrible situation. Once she was safe, she told him everything and Karen was charged with child abuse and sent to prison. As a disabled person, my life can be a struggle at times. I was involved in a car accident years ago that left me with limited mobility in my legs, and since then I've had to rely on a wheelchair to get around. While I not try to let my disability hold me back, there are certainly challenges that come along with it. One of the biggest challenges I face is simply getting around. Navigating crowded parking lots and sidewalks can be difficult, and it's especially hard when I need to go grocery shopping. At the store, I often find myself struggling to find a handicapped parking spot. These spots are usually taken by able-bodied individuals who seem to think they are entitled to use them just because they are closer to the store. It's hard for me to understand why people can't just be considerate and leave these spots for those who really need them. Despite the challenges I face, I refuse to let my disability define me. I work hard to be as independent as possible and not let anyone treat me differently because of my physical limitations. I'm determined to live a full and meaningful life, and I won't let anything stand in my way. One day I decided to speak up about the issue of handicapped parking spots being taken by those who didn't need them. I wrote a letter to the grocery store and explained how difficult it was for me to find a spot, and how it made me feel when I saw able-bodied people using them. To my surprise, the store listened to my concerns and made a change, reserving a few handicapped parking spots specifically for those with disabilities. I was thrilled that things were starting to change for the better, but not everyone was happy about the new arrangement. One day, as I was leaving the store, an entitled woman, let's call her Karen, confronted me in a parking lot. She was upset that I had taken her spot and started picking a fight with me. I tried to explain to Karen that the spot was reserved for those with disabilities and that I had every right to be there, but she just wouldn't listen. She was convinced that I was trying to steal her spot and continued to berate me. It was a very unpleasant and stressful situation, and I just wanted to get away from her as quickly as possible. Eventually, I was able to escape Karen's tirade and make my way home. I was grateful to be back in the safety and comfort of my own home, but I couldn't help feeling upset and frustrated about the encounter. It was just one more example of how difficult it can be to be a disabled person in a world that often doesn't understand or appreciate our challenges. Despite it all, I remain determined to live my life to the fullest and not let anyone else's negativity bring me down. But unfortunately, Karen was not finished with me yet. A few weeks later, I found myself in a more aggressive encounter with her in the same parking lot. This time, she took things to a whole new level. "What are you doing in my parking spot?" Karen demanded, approaching me as I was getting into my car. This is a handicapped parking spot," I replied calmly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "It's reserved for those with disabilities." "I don't care," Karen snapped. "I need to be close to the store and I'm not going to let some cripple like you take my spot." I was shocked by Karen's harsh words and couldn't believe she was speaking to me like this. I tried to ignore her and simply get into my car, but she wouldn't let me. She stood in front of my car, blocking my way and continuing to yell at me. Just when things seemed like they couldn't get any worse, a good young lady appeared out of nowhere and intervened. They saw Karen attacking the disabled person in the parking lot and decided to take action. My hero was a young woman in her mid-20s, with long brown hair and a kind, compassionate look in her eyes. As it turned out, she was also a black belt in a martial art and knew how to defend herself. She stepped in and put Karen in her place, using some fancy moves to detain her and hold her down until the police arrived. "Are you okay?" the girl asked me, looking concerned. "I am now," I replied, grateful for her help. "Thank you so much for stepping in." "No problem," she said with a smile. "I couldn't just stand by and do nothing while someone was being attacked. It's just not right." I was grateful to her for stepping in and helping me out. Without her intervention, things could have gotten much worse. I was relieved that Karen was finally being held accountable for her actions, and that I could finally leave the parking lot in peace. However, Karen was not done yet. As the police arrived to arrest her, she suddenly lunged at the girl that saved me, trying to take revenge on her for intervening. But the amazing girl was ready for her. She was clearly a skilled martial artist, and she easily sidestepped Karen's attack and put her down with a swift move. Karen hit the ground with a thud, looking dazed and confused. The police quickly stepped in and subdued Karen, handcuffing her and taking her into custody. I gave them a statement about what had happened and thanked the young lady for the help. "You're welcome," she said with a smile. "I'm just glad I was able to help. No one should have to go through something like this." I couldn't agree more. In the end, Karen was charged with assault and harassment, and she ended up having to serve several years in prison for her actions. It was a just punishment for someone who had shown such a blatant disregard for the rights and well-being of others. I was relieved that Karen was finally being held accountable for her actions and that she would no longer be able to terrorize people in the parking lot. It was a scary and unsettling experience, but I was determined not to let it get me down. I was so grateful to the heroic girl for standing up for me and making sure Karen was brought to justice. Her intervention had made all the difference, and I will always be grateful for her kindness and compassion. I just told this story at a gathering over the holidays when a family member asked if a female experienced sexism while serving in the military. On the whole, I had a great experience serving and most of my co-workers were really amazing, except for Brad. It's a fake name. Brad was a living worst. He was a lazy know-it-all but really only know enough to get by and keep up appearances, and a misogynist. During our first in-office interaction, he leaned back and said, totally unprompted and completely out of context, "Yeah, I've never met a woman who was smarter than me." To which I immediately replied, "That's weird because I've met a lot of women smarter than you." Thus began our Cold War. Part of our job was to maintain a certain level of knowledge and proficiency among an array of different topics and specialties. We had a whole book that we were more or less supposed to know front to back. Because this was part of my job, I made sure to stay proficient. Not everyone thought this was important. Now Brad, the smartest person in the room, was in the training shop and was in charge of creating and proctoring our weekly proficiency and knowledge tests. A test which I aced every week, scoring higher than the males, who did not care that I scored higher, and even catching errors that Brad would make. Brad's fragile ego could not allow him to admit that me, a woman, knew even more than the other men and sometimes even more than Brad himself. So he would find arbitrary reasons to fail me every week. Didn't like the specific color of blue ink I was using? Fail. Didn't like that I abbreviated my rank when signing the test? Fail. Didn't think I put enough thought into choosing the multiple choice answer? Fail. Walked into the testing room before him, thus invalidating my test results? Yes, literally. Fail. We all laughed off this behavior because he was only making himself look insane. And my unit commander saw that I was getting all of my test questions correct. Again, it was my job to know that stuff. So he was unfazed by my 0% scores. Not to mention, this was all internal testing. So no one outside our organization ever got the results. Not really a big deal. Until Brad decides that he needs to nitpick a non-issue, he decides that instead of doing his weekly test, he was going to spend the hour lecturing us on how to properly classify presentations. Evidently, a female in the office had misspelled a classification on a slide. Think unclassified with one S versus unclassified with double S. Thus creating a major security breach. She didn't. Now, don't get me wrong, using proper classifications is incredibly important and is top priority in creating a presentation. But the difference between secret and secret is not going to bring down the establishment. Most people except for Brad evidently can use common sense and know that a slide marked secret with double T should still be treated as secret. Because, well, duh. On to the petty revenge. Brad made a ponderous presentation, including slides that actually included an array of different classified material. This presentation was supposed to take all hour. By the 5th or 6th slide, however, we get some really sensitive information. And what has been missing from every single one of Brad's slides? You guessed it, a classification on the top and bottom of the slide. Brad had just spent 15 minutes teaching to a room full of adult professionals how important slide classifications were and how essential it was to have them on the top and on the bottom. Now, should I have made a note and approached them after the presentation? Maybe, but did I? Hell no. I got my petty revenge. So I waited until he took a pause between slides and said loudly from the back of the room, "Hey Brad, maybe next time you want to teach us how important it is to classify slides, you might want to actually classify your own work. You've got some sensitive information on there that isn't classified, which you just explained to us is a major security breach and should be reported to the commander. None of your slides have had classifications up to now. Unless this presentation is an example of what you don't want us to do." Shocked Pikachu face. Brad looked like a trout gasping for life as he glanced at his computer, to me then back to the screen. Everyone started laughing, and two of our superiors actually got up to leave saying they had things that were actually important to get to. Sometimes, the best revenge is just knowing how to do your job and do it well, despite the Brads of the world. It's the morning after Christmas, and before driving home, it's about an hour away, my parents, my brother and my wife and I decide to get lunch. We decided on pho because it's warm Vietnamese soup and it's cold outside in Florida. Very rare. My wife happens to be Asian. As soon as we get into the restaurant, it's packed. My wife and I are foodies, and since there is a wait, she opens the menu to see what she wants while we wait to be seated. I'm also reading the menu over her shoulder. Suddenly, a woman begins poking and grabbing at my wife repeatedly while she's talking on the phone. She says, "Hey, they are after us," pointing in my face and gesturing at the rest of the family. My wife and I lived in New York City for years and are used to crowds and tuning out others. My wife did not hear her but felt the poking and immediately said, "What are you doing?" I noticed what's happening and without thinking say, "This is my wife and we are customers. She doesn't work here just because she's Asian." I probably shouldn't have verbalized that mistake, likely had to do with her race. But I wasn't thinking. I wasn't prepared for this situation. Instead of the lady apologizing for the mistake, she, while still talking on the phone, doubled down saying that she didn't accept that what she did was due to race, instead was due to my wife holding a menu. We ignored her, so she just kept repeating herself to our backs with different words over and over between taking breaks to continue her phone conversation. My dad could tell my wife and I were upset and suggested we leave, which we all immediately agreed to and did. My wife cried in the car. We were in one car and the rest of the family in another, but we all got lunch somewhere else and still had a nice time after. People shouldn't poke or grab at strangers while waiting to be seated at a restaurant, and should apologize when mistaken. Finally, I acknowledge I shouldn't have said anything race-related, as I think that made the mix-up much worse. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.